Hi, and welcome again, everyone, to the annual Deborah Rawson lecture. Excuse me. We're very pleased to have David Hathaway from the Green Mountain Club with us tonight. David has been a volunteer in many capacities with the Green Mountain Club for a number of years now. He's a retired IBM engineer, and he will tell you more about himself. But again, welcome. We're very happy to have you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. So I am, as Carolyn said, a volunteer with the Green Mountain Club, and my cover picture here is a view south from the summit of Camel's Hump. I'll have a bunch more pictures of different places on the trail. My history with the Green Mountain Club really started when we moved to Underhill in 1990. And I had done a little bit of hiking when we lived in Richmond, and climbed Camel's Hump once. I'd been up Mansfield once, but I'd really just sort of hiked locally around our house. But when we moved to Underhill, we're up on Pleasant Valley Road, so I started hiking all of the Mount Mansfield trails, and I have a map from 1989 that I've redlined every trail on Mansfield that I hiked. After I had done that for a while, and I kind of got tired of hiking the same trails over and over again, I decided to branch out. And in 1996, when I turned 40, I decided I would do a long trail end-to-end hike. My intent had been to do it in 1 year, or as a through hike, and it ended up being a section hike, meaning I did it a piece at a time and finished in 1999. When I turned 46, I started doing peak bagging. If you're not familiar with that term, it means I tried to climb lots of different mountains. And it seems in some ways a silly endeavor, but it got me to places I wouldn't have hiked otherwise. So I've climbed the 46 Adirondack high peaks, the 100 highest peaks in New England, and 19 of the Colorado 14,000-foot peaks while doing that. Around 2007, I started leading trips for the Burlington section. I'll talk a little bit more about sections in a minute. And I became a trail adopter for the Rock Garden Trail on Mount Mansfield, which means I go up there at least 3 times a year and keep the trail in good condition. In 2010, I decided once again to do another through hike of the long trail. And it again ended up being a section hike, but this time I did it in 6 months instead of 3 years. And then in 2014, I retired from IBM and started taking on more volunteer roles. So I'm the Burlington section webmaster and email answerer. So if you send email to gmc@gmcburlington.org, I'm the one who gets it. I'm the outings chair for the Burlington section. I'm a corridor monitor, which means I look at the boundaries of some of the parcels that the GMC owns and make sure there's no encroachment. And I'm a map and compass instructor. And then this summer, when the previous chair became president of the overall GMC, I became the chair of the Trails Management Committee. So that's my summary of why I'm qualified to give a talk on the GMC. This is my background in the area. Talking about the GMC, this picture here is at our visitor center in Waterbury. There's a little kid here looking at a 3-dimensional map of Vermont that has the Long Trail and a lot of other trails drawn in on it. And we as a club have been maintaining and protecting Vermont's Long Trail and the Long Trail system since 1910. And that includes building the trails, it does trail maintenance, conservation, and community outreach and education, which includes talks like this and mostly leading outings and introducing people to the outdoors and to the trails. We are committed to ensuring the GMC and the Long Trail system are places that are inviting, safe, and open, regardless of age, gender, race, religion, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. And that's something that we're really trying to do more of. Sometimes there are impediments for certain people to access the trail. We've had unfortunate situations where people have left inappropriate comments scribbled in log books and things like that. And so we make an active effort to try to remove those and to make people feel welcome. So we manage the Long Trail and its side trails, the Appalachian Trail in Vermont, and the Northeast Kingdom trails. And so this adds up to about 500 miles of trail, 70 shelters and sites, meaning tent sites, overnight sites, 5 camps. These are things we rent out that are, mostly for winter skiers and things like that. We have 9,000 members overall, and the Burlington section, which is our largest section, has 1,150 members. We have 14 sections and 10,000 volunteers, 25,000 acres of land stewarded. I don't talk about it elsewhere, so let me talk just a little bit right now about the organization of the club. The club is organized in sections. So there's a Burlington section, Montpelier section, Breadloaf section in Middlebury. There's an Upper Valley Ottaquechee section, Bennington section, and so on, Northeast Kingdom. And each section is responsible for trails in its area. So the Burlington section is responsible for maintaining the trail, the Long Trail and side trails from the Winooski River to Smudler's Notch. Other sections have different portions of the trail. There are a few sections of trail that are not owned, if you will, by any section, but those are kind of covered by the main club. The main club has all of the paid staff. The headquarters is at our visitor center in Waterbury. And that includes people who do things like land stewardship, interacting with other organizations. So we get a lot of funding from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy for trail work on the Appalachian Trail. We work with other groups, U.S. Forest Service, Vermont Forest Parks and Recreation, and a lot of the professional interaction, if you will, and a lot of the heavy-duty trail building, and I'll show some pictures of that later, are done by the folks from the main GMC headquarters. But most of the maintenance and most of the outings that we hold are done by the sections. So what about the Long Trail? A lot of people don't realize it, but the Long Trail is older than the Appalachian Trail. It was conceived in 1910 and finished by 1930, while the Appalachian Trail was conceived in 1921. So we predated the Appalachian Trail by about 11 years. The length has changed a little bit, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But at this point, it's about 272 miles from the Massachusetts border to the Canadian border. And almost all of that, except for about 6 miles, are permanently protected. So we're working to get a completely protected trail, but there are still some portions of it that are on private land, and we don't have a conservation easement. And there's just, at this point, no easy way to reroute the trail, but we continue to work on that. There are hundreds of miles of side trails and access trails, and the trail summits most of the major peaks in Vermont. So we go over Mount Abe, Mount Ellen, Camel's Hump, Mansfield, Madonna, Jay, Belvedere, lots of other peaks, Killington. So The mission of the Green Mountain Club has evolved over the years. The first two lines of this are exactly the mission that was adopted in 1910 when the club first was created, and that is the mission of the Green Mountain Club is to make the Vermont mountains play a larger part in the life of the people. And we have since added to that we do this by protecting, maintaining the Long Trail system and fostering through education the stewardship of Vermont's hiking trails and mountains. And what it means to steward the trails has changed over the years. And I may talk a little bit more about some of that. Let's see. Okay, so more Green Mountain Club history. James P. Taylor is credited with conceiving this trail that ran along the spine of the Green Mountains. Both the Long Trail and the Appalachian Trail were conceived at the summit of Stratton Mountain in southern Vermont. And the club was founded in 1910, and a first cut of the whole Long Trail was completed by 1930. And today we have a team of year-round staff, seasonal staff, and lots of volunteers. The trail would not be able to be maintained if we didn't have all the volunteers that we've got. So the timing of this talk was somewhat fortuitous because a piece of Green Mountain Club history is going to be celebrated with an unveiling ceremony for a historical marker in downtown Burlington a week from tomorrow. And you are all invited, anyone who's interested. This is the plaque that's going to be, ceremonially unveiled. And the postcard at the bottom is the picture of the old Van Ness house, which was the site of the meeting. I think today it's the TD Bank at the same location. More early history. On the left here, we've got a picture of Will Monroe, who did a lot of the early building. So James P. Taylor had the idea of the trail, and Will Monroe, who was a professor at UVM and had a farm site at where the Duxbury Trailhead for Camel's Hump is today, really did a lot of the work working on the early portions of the trail. The first portions of the trail that were worked on were on Mansfield and Camel's Hump. And then going south from there, there's a section over Mount Ellen, Mount Abe, and so on that's known as the Monroe Skyline for all of the work that he did. On the right, we've got the Three Musketeers, who were the first three women to do an end-to-end hike of the Long Trail in 1927. And on the left here, we have a picture of Taft Lodge, which was completed in 1920. This was the first shelter on the Long Trail. It's just northeast of the chin or the summit of Mount Mansfield on the Stowe side. So if you go up the Long Trail from the Barnes Camp Visitor Center on Route 108, you will get to the Taft Lodge. On the right, I'm saying early days, and this is not early days picture. This is a picture from 2017, but our executive director, Mike DeBonis, for his vacation, this is definitely a busman's holiday, he decided to hike the Long Trail in 2017, equipped as closely as he could to what people would have been using and had available in 1917. So he was using a hand-woven ash pack basket, wearing wool clothes, no synthetic tents, nothing of the sort. It was an interesting hike. One of the things that we've done from the beginning is we've had some publications. So the first newsletter for the Green Mountain Club was called the Green Mountain News, and this was published first in 1922, and that's a picture of the first issue, the top of the first page of the first issue. And that has morphed into the Long Trail News, which you see on the right. That's the fall issue for this year. And there's a link on our Burlington section website that will take you to almost all, digital copies of almost all of these newsletters if you are a glutton for historical information. We've also been publishing guidebooks from the beginning. So on the left is the first edition published in 1917. I don't have that one. The other 4 editions that are shown here are various versions that I've gotten over the years, and I have all on my bookshelf. And you might say, if you have a copy of the Long Trail Guide, why do you need to keep getting them? And I will get to that in a minute, but the short answer is things have changed, and there are both updates to the way we use the trail and the actual route of the trail. The GMC publishes a lot of other materials as well. There's a lot more than what's shown here. These are just the ones I pulled out of my bookshelves and took a picture of. At the top left, you see 2 different editions of a waterproof Long Trail map. On the bottom, you see 2 different versions, 1989 version and I don't know exactly when it was, but it's a more recent this century version of the Mount Mansfield trail map. And once again, there are a couple of trails that are on the map on the left that don't even exist on the map on the right. There's an old trail called the Triangle Trail that went over the nose, and a trail called the Story Trail that went around from the top of Sunset Ridge to north of the Chin, and that doesn't exist. To the right of that, you see 2 versions of the Day Hiker's Guide. One was a fairly early version. This is a more recent guide that we haven't been published for as long. But if you looked at them, the one on the right is about 2 to 3 times as thick as the one on the left. And we ought to have other waterproof maps like the Camel's Hump map and the Northeast Kingdom maps up above, as well as other publications like the book about Long Trail guides and Vermont Long Trail place names. So this slide I label Long Trail Protection, and it shows 3 different versions of the map of the Long Trail from Camel's Hump to Bolton. And the reason I chose this is because there have been drastic reroutes of this portion of the trail. If you look carefully, you see on the left the trail when I first started hiking in Vermont, and when I lived in Richmond, the trail went over Robbins Mountain in Richmond, and I lived on the side of it, so I could hike up to the Long Trail. A landowner decided that they didn't want the trail going through their property, and the trail had to move. So it moved to the route that's to the right. Now that entailed a long road walk on Duxbury Road. So it's a little harder to see on the next one, but there's another map here where the trail is now going, instead of going over the Jonesville Bridge, the car bridge, it's now going over a new pedestrian bridge that is over the Winooski River. And some of those moves have been to reduce the amount of road walking, but there's been a lot of movement of the trail over the years because various landowners have decided that they don't want the trail on their property, and we have no legal protection for the trail. So beginning in the 1970s, there was a huge effort to protect the Long Trail, to find a permanent corridor with permanent protections. And as I said earlier, we're up to the point now where only about 6 miles of the trail are unprotected. It so happens that the very first step you take from Massachusetts into Vermont is currently on unprotected land, but that's one of the topics that our Trails Management Committee is going to be taking up this year. All right, so once you've sort of figured out where you want the trail, you have to build it. And this is a picture, it's kind of a pieced together picture of a couple of people moving a really big rock. If you ever go up on the trails and you see these really huge rocks and you wonder how people got them there, this is one of the ways. So this is using a big grip hoist, which is essentially a little portable winch that can haul very big loads using a steel cable, and they're maneuvering this rock into place. So if you ever go up on the trails and you see all these nicely placed rocks, and you wonder how all of those things just happen to fall into place to form this really nice set of steps, this is how. And it's a lot of work. This is another picture of people doing trail building. So once you've got the rock roughly in the right place, they're using big rock bars to lever it into the final location that they want. And that's used both for stepping stones and for stones that will form water bars to divert water off the trail. And all of this is a lot of work. This is generally done by the Long Trail Patrol, and there's both a volunteer and a paid seasonal staff version of the Long Trail Patrol, and they do the major construction projects. So once you have a long distance hiking trail and you want to hike it from end to end, you have to have a place to stay. And so we maintain a system of shelters. And I'm just have pictures of a few of the shelters here on the trail. The picture on the left is of the Seth Warner shelter, which happens to be the first shelter you reach when you cross the Massachusetts border into Vermont. And it's also a problem these days. I think it's one that's going to be decommissioned and removed because it's very close to a number of roads and it has become a magnet for partiers. So we are trying now not to have any trails within 1.5 miles of any accessible road to reduce the nuisance factor. As it is right now, a lot of thru hikers can't really use Seth Warner shelter because it's full of people who are there partying. We're trying to keep a tent site there, but I don't know if we'll be able to. Moving a long way north, and I did these in somewhat random order, Bamforth Ridge Shelter is on the north slopes of Camel's Hump. It's actually below the slopes, but it's between the Winooski River and Camel's Hump. And that's a relatively recent shelter. On the left is Goddard Shelter on Glastonbury Mountain. I just remember it as one that I particularly liked. It's very close to the summit, and we're generally not building shelters that close to the summit these days, but that was an example of this. The picture on the right is Tillotson Camp, which is up in Lowell, Vermont, and I led a trip up on a loop hike up over Tillotson and Belvedere Mountains just this past Sunday, and this is a picture I took on that trip. So you see the group of people from my hike, and behind them is Tillotson Camp, which is one of the shelters on the long trail. A couple of other trail shelters that I particularly like. Round Top Shelter. When I did my first long trail end to end in 1990, started in 1996. This was a brand new shelter, and I really liked it. It has 3 skylights. It's kind of a funny shape. It's like a 4-sided building with a corner cut out. So it's got an L-shaped floor, and it's a really nice lean-to shelter. Great views to the west. Corliss Camp is north of Laraway Mountain, and it's a kind of a cool shelter. Again, just one that I sort of like. So I took a picture and I stuck it in here. These two are 2 of the shelters that are the responsibility of the Burlington section. So the one on the left is Puffer Shelter, which is on Bolton Mountain. This was rebuilt in 1975, and a bunch of us went up maybe a month ago, a few weeks ago, to assess the shelter to see what kind of work it needed. The roof really needs replacing, and it needs some bracing to keep it from falling over. One corner of it needs to be jacked up. And I think maybe in a week or 2, we're going to have a work trip to go up and do that, but that's not finalized yet. Again, the guy in the center here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the guy in the center on the right side of the shelter is Dana Barron, who's a past president of our section and is our shelters chair for the section. On the right is an old picture I took of Butler Lodge, just because I didn't find a new one. But Butler Lodge is just below the forehead on Mount Mansfield. And this is a picture I took in 2010 when I was doing my hike. The porch has since been replaced and there's been a number of repairs to it. But this is one of the most accessible shelters. It's probably one of the closest ones to most people here. If you go up from the Stevensville trailhead, there's a trail that takes you straight to it. This is Taft Lodge. I showed you a picture of Taft Lodge in 1920. This is Taft Lodge in 2020, when we were celebrating its 100th anniversary. And the picture on the right shows the commemorative plaque that we put up there in the shelter last September when we had a little birthday party for the lodge. This sign and a lot of signs like this are actually made by Howard Van Benthuizen, who is a recently retired Vermont state judge and also the president of the Green Mountain Club. And he routes these by hand and makes them. And if we need a new sign, we call Howard and he'll make a sign for us and we bring it up and put it up. So if you have shelters, you have other needs. Human waste in the backcountry and human waste management, especially when we have a lot of use of the trails, is an important consideration. So the picture on the left is an old style pit privy where you dig a hole, you put a house over it, and when you use it, you hold your breath and get out as quickly as you can because they really stink. On the right, you see a composting privy, and what you really see, the privy is the thing in the background, but the two tanks in the foreground are composting bins. And these are used in high use areas. This is where a lot of people are using the trail, using the shelter. For example, we have these around Stratton Pond, Butler Lodge, on a lot of the more popular mountains. And they work great, but they require a lot of maintenance. Somebody has to remove the waste, put it into the composting bins, stir it, and once it's fully composted, one of these bins has finished composting, it's then safe to spread out on the forest floor and let merge back into nature. But they are a lot of work. What we have moved to, and we are moving to any place we can because they are low maintenance and they are very effective, is something called a moldering privy. And you'll see in both of these cases, the privy is up off the ground. You can't see it on the left, but there's a stairway that goes up to this, or a ramp that goes up to this. But below it, you see some timbers that are a kind of a crisscross framework. Around that is hardware cloth and screen, so this keeps critters out, but there's no pit and there's no active management of the site. Instead, all of the waste just goes down. It accumulates at the forest floor level, and it slowly composts with worms and other invertebrates. And because there's not a pit that concentrates the odors, things dry and they're much more pleasant. This was actually developed by a GMC member from the Upper Valley Ottaquechee section. It's great backcountry technology and it's being adopted around the world, but it started here in Vermont. The one on the right is a 2-bin moldering privy. And so one of the issues with these is the pile of waste can build up and it takes a while to decompose. So the way these work, you'll see the platform underneath is twice as wide as the privy. So what happens is maybe every couple of years, you have to send a crew up take the little roof off the left section. They slide the house over to the left. They move the roof over to the right section, and you essentially let the part under the roof slowly decay over a period of years. And then, when you're ready to move the house back to the other side, you first remove all the now fully decomposed waste and spread it out on the forest. And nobody has to go and stir it constantly. So anyway, that's enough of backcountry human waste management, but it is a very important part of what we do. And if we didn't, the trails would be a real problem. Okay, so once we've built these and we have this infrastructure, we have to maintain them. So this is a series of 3 pictures. On the left, you can see a bridge up on Sunset Ridge Trail that has a bunch of holes in it, a bunch of rotted planks. And I had a very, very helpful group of Boy Scouts who were looking for some conservation hours, and they volunteered and helped me carry up. They carried up a lot of the planks that we needed to replace the rotted ones. The middle one is me screwing in some of the new planks, and on the right you see a group of us posing on top of the bridge with the planks replaced. We also have signage that we have to deal with. So on the left, I said that I'm the adopter for the Rock Garden Trail. The picture on the left is the trail sign at the junction of the Rock Garden and Maple Ridge trails that's been there for a long time. And this is the way it was when I inherited it. And that sign is just stuck in a pile of rocks, and the wind comes along and the snow comes along and it falls over and it gets shoved off into the woods, and I have to go find it and I have to prop it back up. So I built the frame, or the stand that you see on the right, because it's all solid rock. You can't put the post into the ground anywhere. And Howard Van Benthuizen made a new sign for us because the old sign was getting pretty worn. And that's a picture of me the day that I went up and replaced the sign. So we have to maintain the shelters, we have to maintain the privies, we have to maintain the signs. And part of maintaining the trails is clearing blowdowns. And there are a lot of them. So we will take chainsaws up. I think the picture on the left is one of our trails chairs. I think that's Paul Beliveau. I think the picture on the right is me clearing some nasty snarl of blowdown. You see, we have protective equipment, and we have, we're working to get better chainsaw training, but we have some training on this and at least a lot of experience. And if we didn't do this, the trail would become pretty much impassable within a few years. And there are places where it's much worse than this. You can see how bad the tangle is on the right, and we get batches of blowdowns like that frequently. I say maintaining trails. This is a picture of replacing the deck on Taft Lodge. You can see the guy levering up the plank on the left is our club president, Howard Van Benthuizen. On the left, we have our past president, Tom Candon, me. I think that's Howard, and then Dana Barron, who's a past section president and is our shelters chair. So we had a lot of presidents on that trip, replacing the decking on the shelter. We were very fortunate for that, and for the work that we're going to be doing on Puffer, that the UVM Outing Club came in and helped carry a lot of the materials, because all of those planks someone had to carry over to the shelter. In this case, we brought them up on the gondola at Stowe, but we still had to carry them across the old fern trail, and carrying long timbers is a lot of work. Carrying the roofing material for Puffer shelter was even more work, but again, the UVM Outing Club helped us a lot on that. So this is a picture, a little animation or video of one little piece of trail work. The guy in the orange shirt is one of our Trails co-chairs who's been doing this for, I believe, 50 years, 40 or 50 years. John Sharp, a retired UVM chemistry professor. We have Tom Candon and Paul Bellevue again, and I'm not sure who the guy on the right is. But you can see there's a bunch of chainsaw work that's been done. So they had cut the tree and now they have to move it. And what you don't see is they're going to have to cut it up some more and move pieces out of the way. And we have trips like this every spring. Every Saturday in May, we have a volunteer trip. The last couple of years have been weird with COVID, but we will usually divide up into 3 groups for each of these trips. And somebody goes out with a chainsaw, other people go out with clippers and hazel hose, which are used to clear water bars. And we essentially get the trail in shape for the hiking season. So this is part of making all of those trails available every year. And we'll go out at other times if somebody lets us know that there's a blowdown somewhere. So this is, the left is a picture of somebody doing some clipping. This was actually last Saturday, a Boy Scout who wanted to do a little bit more work, and he came up with me on Rock Garden Trail, and he's clipping some branches for me. The right picture is someone clearing some water bars. You can see a big pool of water on the trail, and he's trying to clear out the leaves from the water bar to drain this big puddle on the trail. But again, this is stuff that we have to do all the time, or the trails erode and the trails become impassable. I threw this in. I'm not a big horticulturalist or naturalist, but we do see some pretty flowers on the trails. So there's a wild iris on the left. At the bottom left is some dwarf ginseng. I only know this because Mary Keenan, who leads wildflower hikes for us, told me that. Trout lilies. On the right is painted trillium. And the middle bottom is something, I don't know what it is. It looked to me like coral. It's some very interesting fungus that I saw up on the Worcester Trail in Middlesex. But I just found it fascinating, and I have no idea what it is, but it was interesting. Okay, so we've done all this work. We've had the idea of the trails. We've built the trails. We've maintained the trails. We've got places to stay. And now we get to use the trails. So I'm ending this with just a bunch of pictures, and I have thousands of them. I just was picking some that I liked best, but there are more pictures than I can. I could do this for hours, so I'm not going to. The picture on the left is a steep section of the Rock Garden Trail where you kind of drop down into this notch, and I'm the person on the left, and you can see there's some handholds, and you've kind of got to climb down all of this rock. We did this last Saturday, and it was really interesting because there was a lot of ice in there. So you have to be really careful with footholds and handholds, and I actually ended up going down first and standing at the bottom and spotting a bunch of people who happened to be doing the trail at the same time, because I know it pretty well. On the right is a picture looking up Sunset Ridge Trail toward the summit of Mount Mansfield. What you actually see up there at the top is the West Chin, which is a protected nature area where hiking is not allowed. And the trail actually goes around that to the right and then up to the summit. But you can see the line of people that are going up, and that's typical of what you would see. On the left here, on this page, is a ladder on what I think is one of the hardest sections of the long trail, not because of this ladder, but because of some other patches of rock here. This is just south of the forehead. So if you're standing in Underhill or Jericho and you look at Mount Mansfield, the chin is on the left, the forehead is on the right, and the trail going south or right off of the forehead takes you down over these ladders and some other rock that is, as I said, in my mind, some of the most difficult part of the trail. And I do want to talk just for a second about difficulty of trail, because that is an extremely subjective thing. I have had many people ask me, because I hike all the time. I've probably been up to the summit of Mansfield 100 times. People ask me, how hard is such and such a hike? And it's impossible to answer that without knowing what you as an individual find difficult. I know people, there's one woman who can do really, really hard hikes. She can hike forever. She can hike long, steep things. She can hike up or over rugged rocks. But if she's on a trail where she thinks she's going to get lost, that is the hardest thing in the world for her. There's somebody else who can do all kinds of stuff, but she doesn't like stream crossings. There are people who can do really hard stuff, but they don't like any exposure. Other people who can do steep stuff with lots of steps, but any slick rock is just really hard for them. So it's interesting thing. And I wrote an article for our Ridgelines newsletter, which is our section, Burlington section newsletter, titled "How Hard Is That Hike?" Specifically going after that question. Speaking of hard points, the picture on the right is a point on Maple Ridge Trail where there's a little step across. It's maybe 3 or 4 feet. It's not, to my mind, it is not very hard at all. But some people find this the hardest part of Maple Ridge Trail, because there's maybe an 8 or 10 foot drop and you are just stepping across an open gap. And some people are just freaked out by that. If it was on the ground, no one would think, if there was nothing, no drop underneath it, nobody would think twice about it. But with the drop, some people find it really, really hard. So on the left is another part of that hard section of the long trail south of south of the Mount Mansfield forehead, this little walkway. On the right is the summit of Mount Mansfield. So we have a lot of use of the trails. Over the last couple of years, with all of the COVID restrictions and people not being able to get out otherwise, we have actually seen quite an increase in both trail usage and in GMC membership, which is great. Something that we have to manage. But this is what the summit of Mansfield can look like on a nice summer day, and sometimes there's more people than that. The left picture here is a little slot on Subway Trail. This is a trail that goes parallel to the ridge of Mansfield, but down a little ways on the west side, the Underhill side. The next picture over is of a cave on Wampahoofus Trail, which goes up to the forehead. The guy in the front there is Phil Hazen, who's a past club president and somebody that I still hope to be hiking as well as when I'm his age, because he's 15 years older than I am, and he's still doing hard loops of Camel's Hump in the winter. Picture on the left is a funny slot on Canyon Trail, which is another one of those trails on the west side of Mansfield Ridge. The next picture is Cantilever Rock. So if you haven't ever seen it, it's a really strange thing. It's this long spire of rock that's just cantilevered out from the cliff. It's a very short side trail off of Sunset Ridge. And if you ever go up to Mansfield Summit, up Sunset Ridge, it's really worth taking the side trail to look at. The picture on the left, I just found funny. This is down south. I think it's near Wallingford. there's a prospect rock in the north, and there's a prospect rock in the south. And this is the prospect rock in the south. And somebody put a sign way up in the tree, and if you walk by it, you wouldn't see it. So somebody else put a sign down at the bottom that tells you to look up to see the sign up above. Just kind of funny. To the right is the bridge over the Lamoille River. We have a couple of other suspension bridges like this. I didn't find, when I was putting together these slides, I have them, but I couldn't find my pictures of the Winooski Bridge, which was completed in 2017. But these have made a difference and removed a lot of roadwalks from parts of the trail. So these are a couple of pictures of me using the trails back in 2010 when I was doing an end-to-end hike of the Long Trail. I got pretty far before I had to bail out because of sores on my feet that were not healing. But the picture on the left is what a campsite sometimes looks like when you've had a lot of days of rain and everything's wet and you got to dry it out. So there's my tent. There's all my stuff hanging. That orange bag is a really bad bear hang. I was not doing a good job of it then. Don't copy me. That is too low. It's too close to the tent. And actually, we are having more problems with bears these days on the trail. They're not going to bother you during the day, but they will go after your food at night. So you should never have any food or lotions or toothpaste or anything that smells potentially good to a bear in your tent. Instead, all of that should be packaged together, ideally in a bear canister. And these are things that we now will loan out from the Green Mountain Club. And you carry those along, you put all that stuff in it, you walk about 100 feet or so from your tent site, drop it in the woods. If the bear wants to, they can kick it around all night, but they can't get into it. In the morning, you go pick it up and get your stuff and go on your way. And then the picture on the right is me in a shelter getting ready to get my dinner, putting my stove together. So we use the trails in the summer, but we also use the trails in the winter. The left is Laraway Mountain. There's some amazing ice falls that are on the that form off the cliff on Laraway, and I usually lead a hike up there in March. The next picture is looking north from the approach to the Mansfield Forehead towards the Chin in winter. The picture on the left is me in something called a spruce trap. So when there are air pockets under the lower branches of, for example, a spruce tree, and the snow falls on them, and it creates this air pocket, you walk along in snowshoes and it doesn't hold you up and you fall through and you look like that, and then you have to get out. This was actually a pretty easy spruce trap to get out of, but they can get harder. The picture on the right is just some people silhouetted against the sky climbing the last few feet towards the Camel's Hump summit that I kind of liked. The picture on the left here is a group that I led going up Nebraska Notch Trail. Just like the light on all the ice on the trees. And then the picture to the right is with low cloud cover looking north, or looking south, from Mansfield Summit along the chain of mountains in the mist. And that's it. So this is the end of my talk, and picture is also the end of the Long Trail. This is the northern terminus of the Long Trail. It's one of the border monuments on the Canadian border. And the picture on the right is me celebrating finish my second end-to-end hike. So we've got some time for some questions. And let me just go on and say I added a slide here that has some links for other resources. There's a Burlington section website and the main GMC website where you would go for membership. If you're interested, please join us, join the club, join us on a trip, join us up on one of our May work hikes. And if you have any questions about the GMC or about local hiking, feel free to send me a note. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. I want to get hiking like right now.
Come join us.
Yeah. So yeah, if folks, you should be able to unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner. You can ask questions that way, or you can type them and send them to either David or I in the chat. I guess I'll start off since I always like to get the ball rolling on these sorts of things. Do you have a sense of why there seems to be more bear activity on the trails? That was intriguing to me.
Well, it's a couple of things, I think. One is we have more use. So if you have more use, there are more opportunities for bears to get food from people. And the real problem with bears happens when they're successful. If bears try to get food from people and they don't succeed, they give up. Just one success and they're going to keep coming back for more. They learn, and they actually learn how to get into various kinds of bear hangs. When I was hiking over in the Adirondacks, you were not allowed to use bear hangs. And we're getting to that point because they've learned, rope tied to tree, slash it with claws, food falls. So I was hiking over there at Colden Lake, and they had steel cables that were looped, and you would hoist your food up there. And that's great in theory, but some idiots came out there, they didn't have proper storage for their foods. They took a cheap grocery store plastic bag, which is not very sturdy. They clipped it into this thing, hoisted it up. Bears came along in the middle of the night. By the way, walking about 1 foot from my tent all night. This was not a sleepful night. And they would rattle the cables until the plastic ripped, food fell. They learn. And so it's a combination of more use and just more success from the bears because people are not properly protecting their food. And properly protecting your food, protects you, and protects the bears. Because if they become a nuisance, then they have to be destroyed. And we don't want that. We want to coexist with them.
Let me make sure that at one of my previous events, I know that I had not a lot of people to unmute, but yeah, it should be good. So what is, I guess, what is the main way that you track? You said that you had increased usage over COVID, but how do you keep track of how many people are using the trails?
So it's not really a quantitative assessment, but when we have our Trails Management Committee meetings, we have representatives from all of the different sections. And, we were all going out to the trailheads and looking and seeing that, boy, the parking area is completely full. There are more people than we've ever seen here. And when I was up hiking, I just saw more people on the trail. So it's it's not an official count, but there's definitely been, I think, increased interest and usage of the trails. And we do, quantitatively, we know that we've had more membership. I think last year we had more end-to-end hikers registering their hikes. So if you finish an end-to-end hike of the long trail, whether all at once as a through hike or like I did twice in sections, if you send in a summary of your trip and whatever else we require these days, I don't remember what it is, to the Green Mountain Club, we'll register you as an end-to-ender, list you in our Long Trail News, and send you a nice little patch that you can put on your pack. And if you saw the picture of me in the spruce trap, you saw a bunch of patches on my pack, and some of those are from end-to-end hikes, and some of them are from being a 46er. But we had 555 people, which was the highest number ever, complete the long trail last year. So that's how we know. I will make a comment regarding equipment, because this is another question that comes up a lot. There were so many things that I could have included in this talk, but I usually leave the equipment discussions for, if people are joining me on a hike, I will ask them about it. But for winter hiking, you really need to have, if you're going out on trails that you don't know are packed, you need snowshoes. And if you go out to the Adirondacks, they require you to have snowshoes or skis, because post-holing, if you don't know what that means, it's kind of what it sounds like. You're walking through the snow and you go up to your knee or to your thigh or something in the snow and make a post hole, and it makes the trail very impassable for others, and it also makes it very hard for you and increases the likelihood you're going to need to be rescued, because you're going to wear yourself out, and we want people to use the trail safely. So you need snowshoes. If you're going on any icy sections, you need either snowshoes with good traction, or what I usually use, or many people use, are micro spikes. They're Hill Sounds trail crampons or Catula micro spikes. Yak Tracks don't cut it. They really don't provide you very much traction. Stabilizers are slightly better, but the micro spikes have little steel plates with bent down, sharpened corners, and they will give you better traction on the trail. Funny story, I will tell you, micro spikes work better with the points down, but they're easy to get upside down if you are not paying attention. I did a hike on Mansfield once, and one foot was gripping and one wasn't, and it took me a while to realize I had one of the micro spikes upside down. So, watch stuff like that. Any other questions? If you think of some later, I did put my email up there, so feel free to send me a note. And please do join us on some of our hikes. We try to have some easy hikes as well as some hard ones. Oh.
I had one, but it's gone now.
Sorry.
Nope. Brain is blank now.
All right. I will say that we live in a wonderful place to do a lot of hiking, both here and elsewhere. So Bill is asking, what would an easy hike be? Qualified with a statement I gave before that easy is in the eye of the beholder. One that I think is relatively easy, and I take people on as an easy hike because it's not too long, it's not too steep. There's a little bit of steep stuff at the very, very, very end, but that's Cantilever Rock. So that's kind of a fun hike to do. And it takes you to a nice destination. Taylor Lodge is another one. There's a little bit of a climb in the middle, but you go up Nebraska Notch Trail from the Stevensville trailhead to where it joins the long trail, and then head north on the long trail to Taylor Lodge. And if you know where you're looking, there's a little trail that's kind of to the side, I think it's just east of the Taylor Lodge, that brings you up to an overlook where you can look out over Lake Mansfield. So somebody here asked about safety and rescues. Is this an issue? We are not responsible for rescues, but I do lead difficult hikes, and I try to vet my participants pretty well to prevent the need for rescues. So the best way to avoid needing to rescue is not to do things beyond your ability. We like to let people push themselves a little bit, but I've had people who called me up and said, gee, I want to join your January, mid-January Mount Mansfield Ridge hike, a really hard hike. You go up Maple Ridge, go along the Mansfield Ridge and go down Sunset Ridge. And they say, I just got my first pair of snowshoes for Christmas and I want to try your hike. I say, thank you very much. Let's find an easier hike for you. So the best way to avoid that, from what we do, is to just not have people get in over their heads. I did lead a hike where there was a woman. We were going up Nebraska Notch and then following the long trail to Butler Lodge and going to go down. And we got about to Twin Brooks tenting area. And if you don't know where that is, it's the long trail gets harder from there. So we had done parts that I thought were relatively easy, and she was wiped out. She was not going to be able to do the rest of it. Fortunately, I think I had a group of about 10, and I had 2 very experienced trip leaders with me. So I was able to tell them to just take the group the rest of the way. And I took her down. We cut short the hike, and I just took her down the ski trail straight down to the trailhead. When I am recruiting outings leaders, trip leaders, one of the things I look for is, I say, like, what hikes did you do? What are the hardest hikes you've done? Have you ever had to turn back? And if they said, well, I've never turned back and I won't turn back, it's like, thank you very much. I'm not interested in you as a trip leader. People who say, I got out and there was one day when it was getting too late. It was going to get dark. The weather was closing in, something, and we decided it wasn't smart to continue. It's like, thank you. Yes, you would make a great trip leader. So having some sense to know your limits, to know your group's limits, are very important in avoiding rescues. I have had to use my wilderness first aid training. I had a woman who broke her radius, the bone in her next to her wrist, on the way down the long trail just above Taft Lodge. And I have a SAM splint and a wrap, and I was able to splint it and wrap it. And several people on the group helped her down, and she was fine, but you have to be prepared for that. So I always say our number 1 priority is everybody gets down safe. And number 2 priority, once you've met number 1 priority, is that everybody has fun. And number 3 priority, in that order, is you finish the hike you planned to do. Question is, are there any plans for trail expansion? I don't know of any. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I was at a meeting this summer with the North Country Trail Association. So the Appalachian Trail is a national scenic trail from Georgia to Maine. There's another national scenic trail called the North Country Trail, which goes from North Dakota and by statute is supposed to end on the Appalachian Trail, but it doesn't yet. It has ended at the New York border at the Crown Point Bridge, but we had a meeting between the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, the North Country Trail Association, the Forest Service, the National Park Service. There are lots of people involved. The Middlebury Land Trust and the Green Mountain Club this summer, planning a route by which the North Country Trail could join up with the Appalachian Trail, which it's supposed to. So I think the current plan, it's not a done deal, but I think it's a good idea, as does Keegan Tierney, who's our Director of Field Operations, is that we will, the trail will go through the trails around Middlebury, and they've already got agreement for that. And then they need our agreement to join up with the long trail, and it will probably go up the Sucker Brook Trail, which is currently a side trail of the long trail, go south 20 or 30 miles to Main Junction. Main Junction is this junction just north of Route 4 in Killington, where the Appalachian Trail goes off to the east toward New Hampshire, Hanover and up into the Whites in New Hampshire, and the long trail goes north to Canada. And so at that point, the southern portion of the Appalachian Trail and of the Long Trail is co-located with the Appalachian Trail. So from the Maine border, the Massachusetts border to Maine Junction, the AT and the LT are the same trail. We will have the same situation from Sucker Brook Trail down to Maine Junction, where the LT and the NCT will be the same trail. And this will make Maine Junction this great hub where you can hike north and go to Canada, or you can go to North Dakota. You can hike east and you can go to Katahdin, and you can hike south and you can go to Georgia, all on established hiking trails. And there's going to be a new U.S. Forest Service office and visitor center very near there on Route 4. And we're trying to work out how we can have, they always have an educational component with these centers. And we would like that information about long distance hiking trails to be a central focus there, because it's such a natural thing at that location. But that's all kind of work in progress.
That is so cool. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Is there a projection for when those might all link up?
All of this stuff is, it's all gradual, but the NCTA is going to have their annual meeting. I think they said in 2023 in Northern New York. And so they would like to have everything established, not necessarily have the trail done, but to have it decided and agreed upon for that meeting. So, they bus people out to hike on pieces of the trail wherever they are, and they would be able to bring people over and show them this link up. But we still have to get the Trails Management Committee as a whole to sign off on it. This is a volunteer, a member-driven organization. So our paid staff does not get to make these decisions. This volunteer committee that I'm now chairing is the one that gets to make it. I think it's a good idea, but we have to get the rest of them to agree to it. And one of the things that we are always concerned about with this is that we maintain the control and authority over the Long Trail. So they've said, yep, no problem. But we're going to get that in writing before we sign off on it, I'm sure.
Well, if there's not any further questions, I think this is a wonderful place to leave it on of the future.
Yes.
But I want to make space for anyone with maybe one last question. All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you so much, David, for teaching us about this.
Yeah.
And,
well, thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed. I always enjoy an opportunity to introduce more people to both the GMC and to the outdoors and to our trails. So join us on a hike. I'll leave it at that.
And thank you for everyone who is joining us virtually this evening. Again, looking forward to the future. Hopefully, in a year from now, we'll all be able to get together in the same place.
That would be nice.
All right. Well, thanks again, and take care.
Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.